Hey, how's it guys? So from the last video, I showed you how to create a SQL database in Azure and how to connect to the database in SQL Server Management Studio. Now in this tutorial, I'll show you how to connect to a Microsoft Azure SQL database in Python. Right, so first let me go to my Azure portal. Then I want to navigate to a database overview page for the database that you want to connect to. And for this demonstration, I'm going to connect to this sample DB database. Now, before we can connect to an Azure SQL database in Python, we want to make sure that we download the latest ODBC driver. And this is the page to download the ODBC driver. And currently, the latest version is 18.1.2.1. And you can find the link by going to the databases page, then go to connection strings. From there, you want to click on ODBC, then click on download ODBC driver for SQL Server. And that will take you to this page right here. Then I want to choose the SQL Server version that you're using. So I'm using the 64th version of SQL Server database. So I'm going to click on the first link, which is going to prompt you to download the driver executable. So simply download the file and install the driver on your PC. And once you've done that, we can go to our Python ID. And here you want to create a blank Python script. Now to connect to my Azure SQL database, I'll be using the pyodbc Python package. Now here, let me change the environment first. Alright, so from the import statement, and here let me make the font size a little bit bigger. Now here from the import statement, I'm going to import the pyodbc Python package as ODBC. You can also use the pyodbc Python package. So essentially, these two packages are the same with a slightly variation. All right, so it's going to be pip install pyodbc. And to read the data set as a table, I'm going to import pandas module. Now to connect to my Azure SQL database, I need to provide my credentials, such as username and password. And because I don't want to share my username and password, so I'll simply show you the credential file's content. So basically, you need to create a credential file that you're going to name this file as credential.py. And inside the file, you want to create two variables. One is going to be your username, the other one is going to be the password. And here I'm going to import my username and password. Now I need to prepare the variables, such as the server address. And you can find the server address by going to the overview page. And from the server name field, you want to copy this address right here. Then you want to provide the database name that you want to connect to. And next, we need to create a connection string. So basically, you can figure out the connection string syntax by going to the products page. Then you want to go to connection strings. And from here, you want to go to ODBC. And here's a sample of what the connection string is going to look like. Now, if we look at the connection string variable, basically we need to first of all specify the driver. In this case, it's going to be ODBC driver 18, based on the latest driver version that we downloaded. Then we need to specify the server address, database name, user ID, and password. Now to connect to the Azure SQL database, so basically we can reference the pyodbc Python package. So type odbc.connect. Then I'll provide the connection string. Now if I go ahead and run this code block to create the connection object. And once I create the connection object to link to my Azure SQL database, at this point, I can basically do anything I want with this SQL database. So for example, now let's say I want to run a query to give me the product ID and product name from the product table. So this is going to be the SQL statement that I'm going to execute in my Python script. to return the data set. Alright, so here I'll create a variable called SQL. And I'll pass the SQL statement to the SQL variable. Now to execute the query, so here we need to create a cursor object. Now from the connection object, we need to reference the cursor method to create the cursor object. Then we can execute the query using the execute method. And I'll pass the SQL statement. Right, so once I execute the SQL statement, and I can retrieve the records using cursor.fetchAll method. And I'll name the output dataset. Now if I print the dataset object, now the dataset object is simply going to return the records cell without the headers. And to retrieve the headers, so here we need to insert one more statement. Now from the cursor object, I'm going to reference the description attribute. And it's going to return the columns metadata based on the SQL statement that I provided. Now I just need to iterate each element from the description output. So here I can say for column from this list object that contains 2 elements. And if we look at the first element, the column label is going to be the first item. So I'm going to reference the first element to retrieve the column label. And I'll name the outputs columns. Now at this point, I have both the column headers and the data set itself. And I can create a data frame object pretty easily at this point by providing the data set to the data parameter and column headers to the columns parameter. And I'll name the outputs df. And it should be plural. Alright, so if I go ahead and run these 4 lines. Now here's giving me an empty data frame. So when I ran the fetchAll method, so I can only retrieve the data set once. And if I want to retrieve the data set, I need to re-execute the SQL statement. Alright, so here let me try again. I'm going to recreate my data frame object. Now this time I can see that from the data frame object, the table returns 295 rows and 2 columns. And if I go back to my SQL Server Management Studio, I can see that when I run the same exact SQL statement, I get 2 columns and 295 rows as well. So this is going to be everything I'm going to cover in this video, and hopefully you guys find this video useful. And don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.